Meyer Lansky, also known as the mob's accountant, was an American organized crime figure who built profitable casino ventures in the United States and abroad. During the 1920s and 1930s, Lansky, along with his associate Charles "Lucky" Luciano, was instrumental in the development of the National Crime Syndicate in the United States. He has a legacy of being one of the most financially successful gangsters in American history. Lansky spent nearly 50 years as a member or participant in organized crime, but he was never convicted of a crime worse than engaging in illegal gambling. Welcome back. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Past Crimes channel and leave a comment below to let us know what other past crimes you would like to hear about. On July 4, 1902, Lansky was born to a Polish-Jewish family who had been subjected to pogroms and anti-Semitism by imperial authorities in Grodno, Russian Empire, which is now Belarus. When questioned, Lansky would always respond that he was from Poland. Along with his mother and brother Jacob, Lansky immigrated to the United States via the port of Odessa in 1911. There, he joined his father, who had already immigrated in 1909 and settled in Manhattan's Lower East Side. While still young, Lansky met Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, in which they established enduring friendships and worked together to run the Bugs and Meyer Mob, one of the most violent prohibition gangs, as well as partners in the bootlegging business. Charles "Lucky" Luciano and Lansky became close friends after they first met as teenagers when Luciano tried to blackmail Lansky into paying him money for protection while the two were on their way home from school. Luciano respected Lansky after he rejected Luciano's threats with defiance, and the two went on to establish a strong alliance. The two of them continued their relationship with seasoned gangster Arnold Rothstein, remaining close until 1928, when Rothstein was murdered. Charles "Lucky" Luciano would, along with Lansky, go on to be responsible for the development of the National Crime Syndicate in the United States. By 1936, Lansky established gambling operations in Cuba, New Orleans, and Florida. These businesses were prosperous because they were built on two innovations. Lansky and his connections had the technical expertise to manage them effectively based upon Lansky's knowledge of the mathematical odds of most popular wagering games. Mob connections, as well as bribed law enforcement, were used to ensure legal and physical security of their establishments from other crime figures and law enforcement. Regarding the games and bets placed within their establishments, there was a strict code of integrity as well. In Florida and elsewhere, Lansky's carpet joints were never clip joints, where players weren't sure whether the games were fair or not. Lansky made sure the personnel in charge of running the games were men of impeccable character. Lansky, who later became a significant investor in Siegel's Flamingo Hotel, persuaded the Italian-American Mafia to appoint Siegel in charge of Las Vegas in 1946. Lansky transferred the illegal profits from his expanding casino empire to a Swiss bank account, where anonymity was guaranteed by the 1934 Swiss Banking Act, in order to shield himself from the kind of prosecution that led to Al Capone's imprisonment for tax evasion and prostitution. The German-American Bund held rallies in the 1930s, and Lansky and his gang went above and beyond their usual criminal activities to disperse them. He recalled disrupting a particular rally in Manhattan's German neighborhood of Yorkville with 14 other friends. The stage was decorated with a swastika and a picture of Adolf Hitler. The speakers started ranting. There were only 15 of us, but we went into action. We threw some of them out the windows. Most of the Nazis panicked and ran out. We chased them and beat them up. We wanted to show them that Jews would not always sit back and accept insults, Lansky further recalled. Lansky also played a significant role in Operation Underworld, which was carried out by the Office of Naval Intelligence during World War II and involved the government hiring criminals to keep an eye out for German spies and submarine-borne saboteurs. Through a senior United States Navy official, Lansky assisted in brokering a deal with the government. In exchange for the Mafia providing security for the warships that were being built along the docks in New York Harbor, this deal secured Luciano's release from prison, which also led to Luciano's deportation to Italy. There was a great deal of concern about an attack or act of sabotage by Nazi sympathizers because German submarines were sinking Allied ships in large numbers along the eastern seaboard and the Caribbean coast. Joseph Lanza reportedly received instructions from Luciano to stop sabotage on the New York waterfront after Lansky connected the Office of Naval Intelligence with him. In 1946, Lansky participated in a covert meeting in Havana to discuss Siegel's management of the Flamingo Hotel, which was causing Siegel's mafia investors to lose a lot of money and was running far behind schedule. Lansky pleaded with the other bosses to spare his friend Siegel, even though they wanted to kill him. Despite being given a break, Siegel kept losing money on the Flamingo. Then, a second meeting was scheduled. This meeting took place after the casino made a small profit. Lansky, with Luciano's assistance, persuaded the other investors to give Siegel more time. However, the hotel started losing money once more, and the investors decided that Siegel was done. Siegel was shot and killed in Beverly Hills, California, on June 20, 1947. Gus Greenbaum and Mo Sedway, two of Lansky's associates, entered the Flamingo 20 minutes after the Siegel hit and seized control of the hotel. For the following 20 years, Lansky allegedly kept a sizable financial stake in the Flamingo, according to the FBI. Luciano's pandering sentence was commuted to time served after World War II as payment for his military service. The condition for Luciano's release was that he consented to accept deportation to Italy and not contest the revocation of his American citizenship. Luciano settled in Sicily, but secretly moved to Cuba, where he resumed control of mafia business. With the approval of the dictator of Cuba, Fulgencio Batista, Luciano also managed a number of casinos within the country. The U.S. government forced the Batista regime to deport Luciano to Italy after learning of his presence in Cuba and his resumption of criminal activity. For 10 years, Batista and Lansky formed a well-established friendship and business partnership. It was decided upon during a stay at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York in the late 1940s that Batista would give Lansky and the mafia control of the country's racetracks and casinos in exchange for kickbacks. Batista would allow for extensive gambling in Havana, and his government would match, dollar for dollar, any hotel investment over $1 million, including a casino license. Lansky would put himself in charge of all gambling activities in Cuba. He immediately requested that a summit be held in Havana with his associates. The Hotel Nacional hosted the Havana Conference on December 22, 1946. Since the Chicago meeting in 1932, there had not been a significant gathering of American underworld figures until this one. There were notables from New York, including Albert Anastasia, Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, Mo Dalitz, and Thomas Lucchese, Tampa's Santo Trafficante Jr., New Orleans' Carlos Marcello, and Buffalo's Stefano Megadino. From Chicago there were Ricardo and the Fischetti brothers, Trigger Happy Charlie and Rocco, and, representing the Jewish interest, Lansky and Dandy Phil Castile from Florida. Luciano, who secretly traveled to Havana with a fake passport, was the first to arrive. The attendees heard Lansky's vision of a prosperous new Havana for those prepared to invest the right amount of money. According to Luciano, he was chosen to lead the mob from Cuba until he could find a legal way to return to the United States. Frank Sinatra, who traveled to Cuba with his friends the Fischetti brothers, was one of the performers at the conference. In order for Batista to retake power, Lansky offered the then-President Carlos Prio Socarrás a $250,000 bribe in 1952. Following a military coup of the government in March that year, Batista quickly restored gambling. Lansky accepted Batista's offer to work as an unofficial gambling minister in exchange for a $25,000 annual salary. In 1955, he changed the gambling laws once more, allowing anyone who invested $1 million in a hotel or $200,000 in a brand new nightclub to obtain a gaming license. This clause exempted venture capitalists from background checks, unlike the process for obtaining gaming licenses in Las Vegas. They were given public matching funds for construction, a 10-year tax exemption, and duty-free importation of furniture and equipment as long as they made the necessary investment. In addition to receiving $250,000 for the license, the government would also receive a share of the revenue from each casino.
From his stronghold in the wild Sierra Maestre Mountains, Cuba's Fidel Castro emerged triumphant after 2 years of guerrilla warfare against the Batista regime.
The 1959 Cuban Revolution and the ascent of Fidel Castro altered the environment in Cuba for organized crime investment. Castro seized power on January 8, 1959, and established a command center in the Hilton. The day before, Lansky managed to escape. Manuel Arrudialillo, the country's new president, moved to shut down the casinos. Castro nationalized all of the island's hotel casinos in October 1960 and outlawed gambling. The assets and sources of income that Lansky had were essentially destroyed by this action. According to legend, Lansky controlled sexually explicit photos of former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and his longtime assistant Clyde Tolson. Author Anthony Summers cites numerous primary sources in his biography, Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover, to support his claims that Lansky used blackmail to gain favor with judges, police officers, and politicians. In order to avoid facing federal tax evasion charges in the United States, Lansky fled the country to Herzliya, Pichua, Israel, in 1970. Lansky was deported back to the United States after 2 years in the country. With the help of loan shark Vincent Fat Vinny Teresa's testimony, the federal government brought Lansky to trial. In 1974, Lansky was acquitted after the government was unable to procure the $3 million, which he allegedly fled Cuba with. Lansky's last years were spent quietly at his home in Miami Beach, Florida. He died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983, at the age of 80 years old, leaving a widow and 3 children. On paper, Lansky was worth almost nothing. At the time, the FBI believed he left behind over $300 million in hidden bank accounts, but they never found any money.